What is a hero? A mythological figure, often of divine descent, endowed with great strength or ability? An illustrious warrior? No. It's a person admired for achievements and noble qualities, one who shows great courage. Welcome to the What's a Hero podcast, where we dive deep into what a hero is and what makes them that hero. I'm your host, Ken Frownfelter, and I'm going to be introducing you to some of the world's most likely and unlikely heroes. You may have never heard of them before, and they most likely have never met you, but they all have one thing in common. They are ready to do whatever it takes to help make you better, even if it means sacrificing everything for you. Let's get into it.
Hey everyone, this is episode 4 of the What's a Hero podcast, and I'm your host, Ken Frownfelter. You know, I talk to heroes on here, and the one thing I'm beginning to notice is, as I invite them on the show, is none of them consider themselves a hero. I get things like, I'm no hero, or I'm the farthest thing from a hero you can get. On the other hand, I get people who are related to or know someone they consider a hero and tell me I should invite them on the show, which I'm totally open to doing. However, the person they tell me about is in the former boat and don't consider themselves a hero, and then I'm back to square one. For example, I received an email recently from a girl telling me about her boyfriend and his brother who, by the stories she told me, are exactly the heroes I think people want to hear from and about. I told her to make sure they're good with it and see if they are interested, and at least let me email them and ask. I've invited several folks on the show, and some are tentative, and I think for no other reason than they don't think they have much to add or have a relevance, because they don't think they are a hero. Let me tell you this. If you have sacrificed major parts of your life, be it time, money, health, peace, marriage, dreams, hopes, or myriad of other personal things for others, some of whom you don't even know, and they may not even like you because of what it is you do, you have something to add. Nobody who serves others can say they do not have a relevance or have nothing to add or say. Much less can they say they are not a hero. Most of the time, they are the ones who have a right to have a say. Why do you think the exposition of the hero archetype in superhero movies takes up half a film, or is a film all in of itself? Think about it. The first Captain America movie was all about his development into his character. Then they kept referring to it for the next 10 movies. The first Iron Man, also all about his development into the hero. The first Superman movies. And I say movies because you can look at the Christopher Reeves one back in the 70s and 80s, and then the newer ones. All exposition and development. Star Wars, Indiana Jones, Spider-Man, The Lone Ranger, you name the hero, and the best stories about them are their origin story, and the desire for people to know where this hero came from and why they gave so much of themselves for others and to others. There's a man named Kent Williams, and I've mentioned him before on the show, but he was a chief of police for a department outside of Chicago. I went to a conference with him, and he was a speaker. I actually went to 2 of them. And he always starts his speech with asking if we know what the basic hero archetype is, or what the basic hero's journey story is. And it's a basic understanding of storytelling, whether it be literature or TV or movies, stage acting or whatever. The hero comes from nothing and struggles as they develop into the hero, fail multiple times as they learn, and are met with great obstacles along the way. Then they have this introspective moment, maybe an awesome training montage happens, and they return to meet their greatest adversary. Majority of the time, it's themselves. The hero then emerges victorious because they have sacrificed for others, helping them during their darkest hours, and overcame their problems. Now, whether the hero survives his endeavor or not does not matter, even though we love to hear the happily ever after part. It's not the hero that's important. It's the struggle of good men and women doing good so evil does not prevail. I mentioned in episode 1 that life is a tragedy, and none of us get out alive. But our legacy lives on. The prosperity of those around us, the joy of life, and that life lived is what matters. That is what encourages and motivates others. And we need to hear those stories so the next generation coming up has an understanding of what they can do and what they can become. I mean, if not, we can let them be raised by social media duck-lipped girls and people who lust after wealth and have a serious lack of character. Then what do they become? A hero's story is meant to be told, be it around a campfire, on a stormy night when the power's gone out, during a long drive, or while you're going to sleep or working out. Sometimes the stories and the details of the story don't matter. It's the character or the hero and who they are that matters. Where they came from, how they got here, why they are doing what it is they are doing, or what caused them to have the internal desire to serve and sacrifice for others. That is what matters. Which brings us to today's guest. He's a firefighter, a good friend of mine, and when I invited him on the show, he asked what the topic would be. And I said, "You are." His reply was, and I'm reading from his text to me, "I'm not that interesting, bro. I'm not a Navy rescue swimmer. I'm not a special forces dude." My reply was, "It's not about what you've done. It's about who you are. Are you in?" And as you can tell, he's here on the podcast, and I want to thank Frank for being here. Welcome, Frank.
Thanks for having me.
Well, you're very welcome, and I'm glad that you could make it today, and I was able to get you to understand that you're more than a hero than you think. And as I said, you're a firefighter.
Yep.
And you've been fighting fires.
I've been in the fire service for going on 7 years, and I've been a career firefighter for about 4.
In career. So that means before the 4 years, you were a volunteer?
Yep. So I was volunteer, and then I was also a student firefighter. So that's kind of the path, at least in this area, the fastest path to get your education and on-the-job training and then make this into a career.
Mm-hmm. So I'm looking across the table from you, and I see you're not very old.
I am not.
You're 20, what, 20?
24.
24 years old. So for the last 4 years, you've been a professional firefighter where you're getting paid and you're working a job.
Mm-hmm.
And then you said before that, for about 8 years. So the 4 years before that, since you were 16?
No, 3 years. So
3 years. Oh, okay.
18, right?
Okay.
When I was 18, yeah.
So right when you're 18, as soon as you got out of school, you're like, I'm going to start fighting fires.
Yep. So I graduated high school and then took that path to move into the student program. So actually, I was senior in high school. We had to do a senior project at the high school I went to. And so you just had to spend a certain amount of hours doing some sort of job shadow thing or something like that. And then basically you would come back and present what you did, what you learned. So I had been saying for a long time growing up, for most of my childhood, according to my parents, that I wanted to be a fireman, other than I think there was like a 1 year period when I was like 4 that I thought I wanted to be a bumblebee. There's Halloween costume pictures to actually back that up. But ever since then, I had kind of said that was the path I wanted to take for numerous reasons. So when I got to my senior year of high school, I did that senior project. I ended up doing ride-alongs with the fire department in the town I grew up in.
So let's go back real quick. Hang on a second before you. So who was little Frankie? What did little Frankie do? What was his thing?
So I was born in Chicago,
Uh-huh.
which is quite a distance away from where we're at now.
Yeah.
So my family didn't stay there for long. Super, super cold there. And I guess my parents were not wanting to raise a family in a big city like that.
Mm-hmm.
So from there, my family moved to a teeny little town in Arizona called Bisbee, which is like a couple thousand people. It's right near the Mexican border. The town's actually, the reason it's there is because there's a huge open pit copper mine there, which is super odd. So moved there, we lived there for a couple years. My little sister was born while we were living there. And then as soon as she started crawling and she would go into the bathroom and flip the bathroom scale over and there was like scorpions under it all the time, my parents decided they were kind of done.
We're getting out of the desert.
Dealing with rattlesnakes and scorpions and all that other stuff that is in the high desert.
Yeah.
So picked up and moved to Oregon at that point, and then been here ever since. So,
well, that's cool. So, what did you do? What were your things? Did you just always? You said you wanted to be a firefighter since you can remember.
Yeah.
And so were you always like taking the garden hose and lighting fires and putting them out, or what?
There
with
was
matches?
a lot of stuff on fire in my childhood, thankfully.
Yeah.
I think. So that really started for me actually when we were still living in Arizona. I mentioned that town was a really small population, so there wasn't a lot of kids that were my age. And actually, as far as I can remember, there was like really only like 2 kids that we knew of around there that were in my age group that I would get to go play with all the time.
Right.
And so one day, one of those kids, his name was O'Laren. His parents, I think, were going to go out of town for some reason, and they dropped him off at his grandparents' house in a town a couple towns away from where we were at. And he was staying, I guess, his grandparents had an RV outside their house, and so he was like using that as like a guest room, I guess. The RV ended up catching on fire, and he actually perished in the RV fire.
Oh man!
And so, being that my friend group is very small, already living there, that had a huge impact on me as a young person, like 5 years old.
Right.
Because I think, that's as a little kid, you always what firefighters are, you know what they do. But I think a lot of times, rightfully so, as a young child, you're not really exposed to what can happen when it doesn't work out, right? It's always a story that people get rescued.
Yeah, they got saved and everything.
Fire goes out, whatever. And so that was definitely had an impact on me for sure. I know that I thought about it a lot as a young person, and then moving into kind of like doing some soul searching as to why I was doing this or what I was doing. Like, I think that definitely kind of kickstarted that thought process for me.
So if there was somebody that was willing to know what it is to fight fires, and they could have maybe got there sooner for him or
something. And
something. I mean, maybe nothing could have happened,
I know
but
nothing about the scenario
because
it was a long time ago, and who knows, right? There's tons of variables that could have gone into that, and I don't think it probably had anything to do with the guys that were going to that specific incident. But it definitely is one of those things to think about, that if you have the opportunity to intervene in something like that would mean a lot. Right.
So, you guys are down there, that this horrible tragedy happens, and how much long after that happened, with that and the scorpions and everything else, did your parents say, we're packing up?
I think it was like a year or so after that.
And maybe that had no contribution to that, but nevertheless, for a kid, all that stuff put together comes around the same time, within a year of each other, and that's got to be kind of.
I don't really remember the tragedy that much. Obviously I've been told about my reaction to it by my parents and what happened. Obviously it had a pretty big effect on me. It's not something obviously that's carried with me as this huge event, but
you never know. I mean,
think about,
it could have had that not happened, had the whatever reaction that you had to it.
Who knows?
Maybe it just kind of blazed that way for you to become what you are. But you got to think that had you not had that reaction, would you have gone the route that you went?
Yeah, who knows?
Who knows? But that's the cool part, is that not knowing, where the future leads, things happen to us for a reason. And we go through different things, and so you move north from Arizona, and you're living there, and life is you're just going to school as a kid, and things are all hunky dory. You watch a lot of TV, or do you go outside to play a lot?
Very outside kid. I grew up in a pretty small town, 20-ish thousand people, and so it was great. I rode my bike everywhere all the time to go to my friends' houses and stuff. I was very fortunate to grow up in a house that had a huge backyard. My dad built us a awesome tree fort that we would hang out in all the time and stuff like that. So there's actually my mom is she's very opposed to us watching TV all the time and stuff.
Staying inside.
our TV was like, I'm pretty sure from like 1978, and it was actually on like a rolling cart. Like it wasn't like a part of like.
Oh, so it's probably like furnishing. It's probably very similar to that TV that Jeff talked about on the last podcast.
Probably, yeah.
Where it was, you had, were you the remote control for it?
I don't think it had a remote. Yes,
well,
so I was.
So you would,
yes.
you were.
Yeah. But yeah, it lived on a rolling cart in a closet, so it was like a special occasion when we got to like bring it out. It was like almost like having movie day at school, like when you hear the cart rolling down the hallway.
Right,
you're like,
oh
yes.
yeah, that's cool. What classroom is that going into?
Exactly. So that was so not a lot of TV, a lot of outside doing stuff, getting hurt, building jumps for my bike and stuff like that.
That's the way a kid should be. You know, get outside, learn to get bumped and bruises. And so you had your ups and downs with friends in the neighborhood or kids at school, and you had bullies, and you were bullied. And were you a bully?
No, definitely not.
I don't know if
Have
I
you
believe
seen?
that.
I'm as short as you, man. I don't think I could bully people if I wanted to.
Everybody listening has no idea how short I am, and so now you bring this up.
For everybody listening, Ken and I are
both
it.
Yeah,
short people.
We're not like.
But this is why we're brothers.
Not like Tyrion Lannister or anything like that. But yeah, we're not the tallest people that we know. So
don't hit our head on anything, though.
That is true. And usually, if there's something, hey, can we reach that? It's underneath a table or it's underneath something or crawl through it.
Exactly.
Yeah, who are the ones that get to go? Exactly. Anyways, moving on. So. You're in school, you're doing all this stuff, and you have your bumblebee time when you think that you want to be a bumblebee growing up and stuff like that, but obviously that goes away. But then you start realizing, I just want to be a fireman.
Yeah, and so I think really kind of the high school years are really what kind of secured that for me. Mm-hmm. So I had an uncle that was also a fireman, which it's kind of like, that's one of the most common things when you get in the fire service is people ask you if your dad does it or something.
Right,
it's a very, very like family oriented career, but also that's just a very traditional thing.
Right.
You have generations of people that work in the fire department. So not directly, but obviously he's a family member, and I knew that he was in the fire service. He was back in the Chicagoland area, and so when we would go visit, obviously we'd go see him at the firehouse, and just getting to see that environment and, you know, the getting to climb on the trucks and meet the guys on his crew and stuff, like that was a very cool thing for me as a young person. So kind of saying that I was going to do that, and then going into high school, you actually kind of somewhat want to start thinking about what you're going to do afterwards. So I kind of started looking into it more. They have you do some of those like goofy, like job fitment like questionnaires. Like I remember I got to do that in one of my classes, and you know, about what are your traits. Do you like working with your hands and all these type of things? And like I did a couple of them, and they both shot out either firemen or like similar type career paths, and so that I think that kind of like reaffirmed for me, like, okay, this would probably not be a bad option. So then kind of as that went on, like I ended up doing some ride-alongs as part of my senior project, which really gave me an opportunity to kind of get an inside look at what it really is.
Right, and realize, it's even cooler than they show on TV or some stupid stuff. Like
yes
that.
And no.
Yeah.
It was interesting. So the department I did my ride-alongs with, they're a transporting agency, so their fire department runs an ambulance service as well. So when you did a ride-along with that department, you didn't get to ride on the engine, you were riding on the ambulance. Which was good, because that got way more calls than their engines did, just given the demographics of their city and the fact that EMS calls are much more frequent than fires or rescue incidents, stuff like that. But it definitely put a different perspective on it. It wasn't, you know, the standard firefighter job that you've seen on TV or in shows or whatever. But I still enjoyed it. It was really interesting to me to start to see that EMS side of things, the emergency medical care, and kind of the diversity of the job.
Because I guess it shows you, and I don't mean to cut you off, but it shows you that it's just not going out and putting wet stuff on the red stuff, as some people say, right?
Yeah.
There's more, especially as a kid, you start realizing, I've got to know, I can't just know how to hold a hose. I've got to know how to, you know, I got to know medical stuff. I've got to know all these different things that come along with that. And then there's more to it. And you know, you were talking about your when people ask, hey, was this something your parents did or whatever? And I remember getting in police work and people asking that same question. Oh, is this something? And I said, well, my dad wasn't. I don't really have any direct family members. My grandpa was a reserve police officer, but he was a full-time firefighter.
Mm-hmm.
And so the question then to me would be like, well, how come you didn't become a firefighter? I don't know. Yeah. I think my thing was I didn't look at. I thought it was just like what you said. I thought it was just putting water on fire. I thought that's all it was, and that's what you did, and you rode around and you played Xbox or you things like that, and not Xbox because that wasn't, but you sat around because I remember watching the TV show Emergency all the time, and I didn't correlate the two because what the show was about was those two guys that were paramedics.
They're on a squad, yeah, right.
And that was the main show. And I remember being with my grandpa actually one time in a car, and we were behind one of those rigs. It was down in L.A.
Yeah,
and he was with L.A. County Fire for his whole career pretty much. But he was like, "Oh, we're behind a pair of dummies." I was like, "What?" He goes, "See, pair of dummies." And I was like, "Oh, paramedic." Oh, and being 8 or something like that, I got the joke long after. So I mean, it totally failed on me, but I got the idea.
Yeah,
I was like, "Oh, yeah." That's from like that's from Emergency. Oh, and so I started putting these things together, but I didn't have enough of him just putting in and showing me all this different stuff. I mean, he would bring he'd drive his truck home. He'd have a take home, and it wasn't a full fire engine or truck or anything like that, but it was one of the more of an incident command type vehicle.
Yep.
And so he'd park in the driveway. And the thing was, we'd always want to go see it, me and my brother and my cousins and stuff. And it was, you just stay away from that. At least that's what I remember.
Huh.
And it was like, oh, because they didn't, want us climbing in it, getting in it.
Yeah.
But this was in the early 80s and 70s when they probably left things unlocked all the time,
Yeah.
So, but I get what you're saying, where this whole idea that, is it because somebody put it into you, but you developed this, that wasn't the case. You developed this on your own.
Yeah,
right?
You could definitely say that. Yeah. Yeah, there's like zero. It's funny because people that know me and they know my family or they meet my parents, they have a very they're shocked both at the person that I am and that I went down the path that I did, because there's like nothing besides, like I said, that uncle that lived 2,000 miles away from me that I only saw once every other year or so. Other than that, there was really not a whole lot of like that kind of family push to be in any sort of service at all.
Right. So you're going through school, you do your ride-alongs, you finish with school, and you graduate school. Are you thinking, okay, I got to go find work, or did you already have something set up? Or
so I kind of already had it set up. So doing that senior project, I was in 4 or 5 months before graduation, and getting to do a ride-along with the people that were obviously already career members of the department I was riding with. I kind of would, everybody I had the opportunity to ask, I would ask them, hey, what was your path of getting to this being your career?
Right.
And it was the consensus across the board is that you, as soon as you graduate, go get registered to start getting a fire science degree. So go to college for it, but then also try to start, getting experience however or whatever way possible, right? And so the best way to do that in my area was to go become a volunteer with a neighboring fire department that had a volunteer program.
Right.
And then they also mentioned that probably over 50% of the people that worked at that department had started by being what they called student firefighters.
Right.
So what that program is, the agency that I'm with now has a program for it as well. A lot of them do. But it's essentially it's an internship while you get your education. So basically you get selected and then you come to work with that department. So you're assigned to a shift, you function as
but you're doing everything a fireman does, but
correct, as much as your certification will allow you to do,
right,
because you're still in training. So there's only, as you finish each academy or each class, then you get those certifications. Then you have a little bit more capability. Right.
But you're the one, you're running those calls, and you're
there with them,
pulling a hose off a truck, and you're hooking up to, and you're
getting all that experience,
booting doors, and
exactly. And then
because you don't have to be certified to save a life specifically. if there's somebody on fire, you can pull them out and you brush the fire off and try to help them.
Brush the probably be kind of a gray area, maybe. If they were outside, I could probably help. But when you first start, if you haven't gone through and completed the fire academy yet, and then you haven't gone through getting your task book done, so when you're done with the fire academy, which mine was 3 months, they hand you a task book, which is basically comes from the state certifying. So
it's like a checklist.
Yeah, and so essentially it has everything, and some of the stuff is so goofy, and I love it now because now I'm filling them out for my students.
Right.
And like one of the first ones is answering the fire department telephone. It got to do it successfully 3 times. And so it's hilarious because you're looking at this book, and like the last page is like successfully enter a structure fire as a member of a hose team, successfully extinguish a Class A fire, blah blah blah. And like like you open it, and the first page is that you have to answer the telephone successfully 3 times, and then of course there's all the dudes on the crew that you're on that will go outside and use their cell phone to call the station, and then just be a royal pain in the butt to see if you're going to navigate it effectively. Or
how do you pick up this? Oh my gosh, man!
So it's the full gambit of all of that stuff, the stuff that you think is unimportant to the stuff that you're like, how am I ever going to get this sign off type of stuff. Yeah. So until you get that done and that gets submitted, you're not allowed to go into anything that's considered an IDLH or immediately dangerous to life and health type of area. So inside of a burning building, things like that. Right. You're kind of that. Essentially, when you first start as a student, you're in the academy, you're going to college for these things, but you're a ride-along that has a costume, basically.
Okay.
Like, you're on the engine, you look the part, you have a uniform, you have turnouts.
So when somebody comes up to you, hey, excuse me, hey, how come this? Well,
you'd have to ask my captain.
Don't know.
Correct. You deflect to a member of authority.
Right.
Because you don't know anything. But so...
At least you're not certified to know anything. You might know all this different stuff, but you
probably
just haven't checked off.
I definitely didn't.
Yeah.
So you kind of you use those first couple months to really try to soak in as much as you can, because you're not really able to do anything. Really, the only thing you're able to do is CPR, because you come in with a CPR card. That's a requirement, because you don't have to. Anybody can have a CPR card.
Right.
So unless we're working a cardiac arrest, you're basically just kind of watching and learning. At that point, but that's good.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when you get that stuff, and you have, depending on how many people you have on your engine, you have all those people to be able to just do stuff, and you can sit and watch with 0-1 accountability. There's hardly any stress until after it's all said and done. At least for the student, it is. And
you would think so, but you still, when you're so new to it and you're put in that position, like you're on engines that are going code 3 to calls, right? You're going to incidents and stuff. Like I remember I had the biggest adrenaline dumps, and now looking at where I am now, and also like looking at new students on my engine company, right? And looking at the amount of responsibility they truly have on an incident, like it's kind of funny. You're like, why were you freaking out? But like, but it at the time, it's so cool.
But at afterwards, when it's all done and all the stress is gone, they always calm down. You're back at the firehouse or whatever. Then that's when the stress really comes in, because then there's, okay, did you watch how they did this, and did you see, can you answer that, and why did they do that, and how come? And so then it starts getting dissected, and that student has to be able to answer the questions on why things happened.
And there are still things that you can take responsibility for. Like I remember one of the things that I took super seriously, and that I instill in my students now to take super personally, is like, if you don't have your certs to go inside a building, you're not an EMT yet. Right? The best thing you can do is know where every single piece of equipment is on the truck. Because then if I'm doing something and I can tell you to go get it and you come right back with it, perfect.
Right.
So make like that is your mission right now, because you can't do anything else.
Learn where the gear's at.
Exactly. Because currently, with the amount of certification you have and your knowledge, that's really all you can do anyway. So if you can be really, really good at that, then you're doing a good job.
So it's just like anything else. Be really, really good at the little things, and the big things won't be an issue.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I mean, bigger picture, it does make an impact, right? Because then if, for your tenure with that department or on that engine company, that engine like the back of your hand.
Right. So you're also saying, so these are all students. So I would assume that, and this is mostly for everybody else out there, when that person, there's openings with this department or whatever department, and you got 3 students who apply, they know that, okay, one, these students, they know all their stuff that they're supposed to do to be a fireman. Two, they know our department so well that it's not going to take much for them. And if they get hired, it's just they're going to be rolling in a little bit easier. There's some things they're going to have to still do more because it's
potentially, yeah.
Right.
It can kind of be a double-edged sword, though, and I've seen it too. Like, you can definitely have people in the student program that, because they're there with crews all the time, they're on shift with people, they're going to incidents, right? I was told this when I started in the fire service. Everybody that comes into the fire service, that I meet them for the first time, right? The second you walk in the door, it's all your time after that is a job interview the whole time. So, no matter what you do, how you talk in the day room, the way that you act on calls, the way you are around the station, all of that, right, is going to weigh on your chances of landing a job when it comes time.
I think that should be honestly how you look at things anyways.
Absolutely.
You're always, even afterwards, you get people that have been doing it for years and years. Like, I've been doing my job for several years, and you've been doing yours for several years. But whatever the case is, you should still be having that mindset of, I'm interviewing for this. I'm showing people that I know how to do this. And because there's several different reasons. One, people are looking at you. People are learning from you. One, because maybe you're doing something a different way and like, oh, hey, that might be easier. Or you're working with a new group of people. Maybe you change shifts or something like that. All of a sudden, these people are like, I haven't worked with this person in a couple of years, or I haven't worked with this person for a while. You have to kind of prove yourself.
Yeah.
Now, there's a point where you shouldn't be adjusting what you do. Oh, I'm going to prove myself, and you're stressed out. But where you are showing that I know my stuff, I know what I'm supposed to do, and I'm going to make sure you're putting out that interview. And because and it's kind of a double-edged sword, like you said. There's that side of it where I don't care what people think about me, but I care about what people think about me.
Absolutely.
Because I want them to understand that I'm a professional and I do my job right. But I don't care that they think that I do it differently, or I don't care that they think that I do it goofy or whatever. Yeah, maybe I always reach over with my right hand to hit my blinker. How ridiculous is that? But, whatever the case may be, you don't care, but you do care. And so you should always be treated like you're interviewing.
Absolutely.
You're showing somebody, hey, that I can do this, and you can rely on me, you can depend on me.
Yeah. And so for people that grind really hard, they put in the right amount of effort, they learn, they show that they're dedicated to learning. So it's not, we're totally okay with you making mistakes when you're new. That's expected when you're a student. And I remember coming in as an 18-year-old and sweating it when I would do anything wrong, including like folding my captain's T-shirts the way that he didn't like, and I'm like, oh god, look, this is the end of the world, right?
Yeah.
Like, and so, but really, like, it can go both ways. You can either be a person that is learning and is asking questions and is recovering from mistakes that you're making, or, but then on the flip side, you can be there for your 2 years while you're getting your degree, be on a shift, going to calls and stuff, but if you're not really showing that you're going to be a good candidate and that you have positive attributes, when it comes time to hire, it's not like you're just going to get a job because you were there, right? If you weren't earning it while you were there, it's not going to work out well for you.
Why are you working harder now?
Yeah,
you didn't. Yeah,
and so it can be a double-edged sword, because it's not like coming in for a job interview with the person
nobody knows you at all.
Exactly, the person on the other side of the table doesn't know you, and you can sell them this romantic version of yourself that gets you hired, and then the second they actually have you coming to work every day, they're like, wow, this guy's a piece of crap.
Yeah, this guy's terrible.
So,
I
go both ways.
And I guess that also goes with the idea. You expect the new guys to mess up. It's part of the gig. I get it. And we do it on the police side all the time. Yep. You're going to be a new guy, you're going to mess up. And so we expect that. Not a big deal. However, don't think that it goes away.
Correct.
Don't think that they're not going to give you a hard time about it.
Oh yeah.
Don't think that you're not going to get a nickname from whatever this mess up is that you make. Don't think that it's like, no, it's a learning experience. Absolutely. And that's what you're expected to mess up, and you got to learn from it. And hopefully that you can have thick enough skin to be able to go back and say, yeah, I screwed up when I was brand new, and here's what I did. And that's why my nickname is, whatever my nickname would be, just that sort of thing. But just understand, if you're new, you're going to mess up. Cool. We expect it.
Yeah.
However,
don't make the same mistake.
Don't make the same mistake, and don't expect that you're going to live it down either.
Correct.
So that also goes to the latter, where if you're a tenured person, if you've been there for years and years, and you mess up, we understand you're human, and hey, why did you do that? I was thinking XYZ. Oh, okay, fine. Don't think you're going to live it down, and you're probably getting a new nickname for it. Blah 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 blah. So, we understand everybody's human, but if you're new, it's part of the gig. So it's cool. So you get into you're doing that. You finally get hired. The place that you were a student or whatever, is that the same place you got hired full time?
No. So I was the department I was a student with was in the next county over from where I work now. So I knew of the department that I tested for and ended up getting a job at. A lot of the people that were my instructors at the college, so through going through the fire science program at the community college I went to,
right,
those guys were were firemen for the department I work for now. And so kind of that was one of the cool things about that program is you're affiliated with whatever department you're a student with, and they're paying for your schooling in turn for you being there on shift and stuff and learning. But then when you go to school, your instructors are firemen from all around the region.
Right.
So you get to, get little nuggets of information from,
and they get to know you.
Exactly. So that's why I got told the first day, like, if you're screwing around at academy, you're potentially affecting your reputation with like 15 different fire departments simultaneously. And don't think that all of those dudes aren't all buddies with each other. And after that day at academy's done and you're being a jackass, that they're not all texting each other like, this dude is
that guy.
Look at this guy, like, or going back to their shift the next day and being like, man, like, I was at academy and this dude who's a student with this department was, being
bad mouthing everybody,
or being super full of himself or whatever.
Right.
So that definitely, you think about that, or
sure.
If you're,
that goes back to you should always be interviewing.
Yeah, absolutely. And so if you're conscious enough to be aware of that, then you try to conduct yourself in the best light possible all the time. But so I got to get exposed to dudes who worked at the department I work for now through that academy environment, which was really cool. A lot of those dudes from the department I work for now were already becoming huge mentors to me. Well, I was not even affiliated with their department. I would see them, for a couple hours a week. But the skills that they were giving me, and then just their overall, their attitude, their mentorship, and their ability as instructors had a huge impact on me, not only wanting to potentially work where they work, but then just my, obviously, personal relationship with them, and then growth as a new firefighter.
Right. So you get to know them. And so I would assume, so they're your instructors then, they get to know you, you get hired on with their department, and now you work alongside those same guys, and now they're your friends.
It's pretty cool.
And they're so I guess even if we were to talk to them, they would be able to say, man, I saw this growth in Frank, that just from a kid to a guy that's absolutely competent in what he does. And
I hope so.
Well, maybe not absolutely. Well, maybe I'll have one of those or two of those guys on, and
you might,
and we'll have to ask them what they think. Yeah, wait for that. We'll see. So they get into there, and they actually see who you become. So you get hired on with this department, and you're working there. You start out, so you have all these certifications. One of the certifications that you have to have is being a paramedic, correct?
No,
you don't.
Nope, I'm an EMT.
So okay. What are the different levels of that?
Of like medical licensing.
So you got paramedic, EMT.
Yeah. So at least in Oregon, right? So around here, there's EMR is the lowest, I guess, tier you could get, which is emergency medical responder. So that's a very, very condensed. Essentially it's first aid plus a little bit. That kind of exists. So volunteer departments can put people through a program that's less intense because obviously they have a day job and stuff. And so like my EMT program was six months long, 2 days a week. So if I wasn't doing this to try to prepare myself for a career in this, if I'm just, doing it to help my community, like that's a pretty big time commitment.
Okay.
So EMR is super limited scope of what you can do, but it is like a level of licensing. From there, you have EMT, or EMT Basic is what it used to be called, which is basic life support is what it's called. So it's, we only have...
So it's next tier up.
Yep. But it's basically the lowest you can get if you want to get a career position, at least around here. So like on the East Coast, there's departments that like don't even run medical calls. Like they literally just do the old school thing of, like you were talking about in the old days, sitting around until there's fire.
Right.
That's not the case on the West Coast really at all. We're a very all hazards type of fire service. We go to everything for the most part. So there's EMT. You can only give a handful of drugs. One of them is being oxygen, so we're breathing it right now. So it's not a super big scope of what you're able to do. Obviously CPR, bleeding control, things like that.
Right.
But your overall, the amount of interventions you can do for somebody that's having a medical emergency is fairly limited.
Okay. So then the next step up is what?
From there, there's intermediate. So EMT intermediate and EMT advanced are two. Intermediate's kind of an old school rank. There's not a lot of states that even recognize it anymore. I think it's still a thing around here just because there's a good amount of people that had it from getting certified that way 15, 20 years ago. And so once those, because they're not even really doing, at least not that I've seen, classes for that level anymore. So I think once those guys kind of retire, that will kind of go by the wayside.
Right.
So that's kind of the middle ground between EMT and paramedics. So those guys can start IVs. They can give some medications for different things, but they don't have quite the scope that a paramedic does.
Right. And so that's EMT, intermediate, EMT advanced.
Yeah, technically it would be advanced then intermediate.
Oh.
Which is kind of weird to think about. Right. Yeah, it doesn't really make a lot of sense, but that's the way it is.
But is that is that the bridge to then paramedic?
Not necessarily. So, okay. But that's kind of the ground in the middle of the two as far as what you're able to do.
Right.
So paramedic is kind of the top in the EMS world. So the first responder world, other than like if you're on a helicopter or something, you might be a flight nurse, which at that point you're technically an RN.
Right.
You're just operating in the pre-hospital environment. But as far as everyday medical calls, you call 911, who's showing up, paramedic is typically going to be the top, or the highest capability,
the most knowledgeable or whatever
caregiver that's going to show up.
Right. Yeah, and so they'd be certified to give whatever
bunch of drugs, stuff that can stop your heart, stuff that can change how fast it's beating, all different types of stuff like that. Right. More invasive procedures like intubation and things like that.
So you are EMT?
Just an EMT. Yep. EMT basic.
Basic.
Yep.
Okay. But does everybody have to have at least that?
Typically,
in your department, does it?
Yeah, at my department, that's the minimum standard, and that's pretty universal. There are departments that will only take you if you have your paramedic, but that's definitely, I think, less common.
Right.
I can think of probably 3 or 4 that I know of, like in the whole state of Oregon, that are like that. I'm sure there's more, but as far as ones that I'm familiar with,
I guess that's like
less common.
That would be like a department, like a police department, that only taking somebody with a bachelor's degree.
Probably, yeah. It definitely limits your hiring pool quite a bit.
Right.
But I mean, you get capability.
Right, because you got somebody that is has some kind of expert skill in something.
Yeah.
So you have that. You're working for a department now. You are an EMT basic. You have all these certificates that you can do stuff. Are you just a basic fireman, or is there something? And I keep saying fireman because I always make fun of you guys when I say that. But are you a basic fireman?
So technically my job title right now is an engineer.
Engineer. What does an engineer do?
So the kind of the classic, or I guess the everyday function of the engineer is to operate the apparatus. So I drive. That's my.
So you drive the engine.
I drive the engine or the truck.
Engineer.
yet. Wow.
So is there?
Connect the dots
Yeah.
here.
Is there a difference? And I do know the answer to this, but I want you to say it because I'm not the expert in the room. Is there a difference between a fire truck and a fire engine?
There is.
So it's just not everything you see that's red that drives down the road that has big old shiny silver on it is a fire truck.
You're technically correct. They're all trucks, yes.
Sure.
But as far as in our line of work, if you say engine, it means it's like a pumper, if that kind of clears it up for you. So it's an apparatus that carries water and pumps water. That's its primary function. A truck means it has an aerial device of some type. So
like one of those big old ladders that
correct.
goes up and
An actual ladder that's affixed to the apparatus.
Right.
So a platform or a tiller truck or whatever, all of those that have an aerial ladder on them, that would be a truck. Something that has a larger pump, it carries water, is an engine.
right. So you get in these. You drive an engine majority of the time.
Majority of the time, yep. My department has a truck as well,
Right.
but it's not staffed full time. So we're all trained to drive it. If there's an incident that requires an aerial device, then we would swap over and take that.
And so you put water not from the ground shooting it up into it, but you can actually be in this ladder truck that gets above the fire and you're shooting down into the fire.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
So you're a fireman. You do stuff. You go on runs. You work 24/7 sometimes. 24 hours a day. You work. You have a different kind of schedule. You don't just go Monday through Friday. You work a couple days in a row. You sleep at the firehouse, and then you take a certain amount of days off or whatever. But what are the things that you're seeing? What do you see out there? You always go into structure fires?
Definitely not.
So then, so you said it was EMT. So you're always going to do CPR on somebody?
Not all the time.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so we the fire service as a whole, but yeah, our agency definitely, and most agencies in our area really consider ourselves to be an all hazard response. And so that means that we like I said, we kind of go to everything. And sometimes that's stuff that isn't even really what you would classify as an emergency. Kind of the joke that we have is that if someone calls 911 and it doesn't fit the police box or the ambulance box, the fire department's going no matter what. Even if it's that your toilet is leaking, or there's debris in the road, something like that. Like if it doesn't fit a pretty standard, like the dispatcher goes, "Oh, this is a police problem,"
right?
It becomes a fire department problem.
So you guys are out there sweeping up glass after a crash.
Yeah, you guys call us for
crash.
that all the time, actually. Yeah.
Oh. Well, I haven't done that this week.
Yeah, we do a lot of stuff, a lot of different stuff. But then again, it all kind of falls within our mission, which
is what?
Essentially life safety is number one. Then property conservation and environmental protection. And so even if it seems kind of mundane at the time, sweeping up stuff out of the road, or somebody calls us because a car dumped a bunch of oil in the street, right? Obviously that's not an immediate, not a human life safety issue. Maybe it's not a property damage issue.
In the long run, yeah, your cars are going to be slipping all over the road. And
yeah,
be like,
it could cause a life safety issue in that respect, or at kind of the bottom of the lowest tier of the priority list, at least we're preventing that from causing an environmental hazard as well.
Right.
So
you're mitigating the possibility of massive amounts of loss of
risk.
life.
Mitigation is what we do.
So you are doing this you only go to people whom you guys know, right?
Yes. Just my family calls.
Just my family calls, and that's otherwise I'm sitting.
No, yeah, that's one of the most appealing things about the job to me, is that we're out in the public all the time, helping people with everything, right? And it's a lot of people don't really know what the majority of our job description is. Like you said, we're not going to structure fires every day. A lot of what we do is going to medical calls, whether they're the person needing CPR, which is definitely probably a much smaller percentage of the type of call that we're going to. A lot of times it's people that are have chronic illness and are having breathing problems related to that, or they have cardiac issues and they're having a heart attack or things like that. So there's that side. There's a lot of the public service side. So we go to a lot of lift assists, which is essentially if you're physically disabled due to age or whatever, and you fall down, you're not able to get back up, we're going to come and pick you up, make sure you're not injured. But if it's ground level fall, you don't need to go to the hospital. The ambulance isn't going to come and just take you to the hospital.
Right.
But by default, we'll come and pick you up and make sure you're okay. And
so you just go and do that. So let's say I'm home alone. I'm sick, or I'm injured for whatever reason, and I'm not able to move around very much. And I'm reaching for my remote and I fall off my couch, but I can't get up. But I have my cell phone in my back pocket. I can call the fire department in my area and say, hey, I just need a lift assist.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I just need you to help me get me back on my couch until my wife gets home. She'll be home in another hour, 2 hours.
We do that all the time.
And I'm being devil's advocate here. Do you see that as being something that is a waste of time, resources, abilities? Or
Absolutely
do you see that as, and why is that?
So, at surface value, if you kind of look at just that, the ground level fall that didn't result in any injuries as just being the singular part of that you're analyzing,
right.
I guess you could potentially view it that way. And that's why a lot of times when people that aren't familiar with modern fire department operations, or even with our agency, when we
right.
Educate members of the public and they ask what a lift assist is, and we tell them, they're like shocked that you're sending a fire truck to go do that, right?
Right.
But really, to me, a lift assist or a low level medical call that we go to a lot of medical calls that are stuff that as a EMT, somebody that is trained to do CPR and do all these things for put tourniquets when you got your arm ripped off by a truck or something crazy, right? And then they call 911 for this thing. It's not the crazy seconds count type of emergency on the surface,
mm-hmm.
but it's an emergency to that person at that time, right?
Right.
It's they call 911 because they felt like they had no other option.
Right. So
and it's the same on a lift assist. You have a person who they have nothing else. They have no other option for somebody to come pick them up, right?
Mm-hmm.
So not only are you going to be, you're that last resort for them,
especially if it's somebody that lives by themselves. They're elderly or something like that.
Which
they live by
is
themselves.
Super common.
And they're there. They can be there for a day or two before somebody comes actually and checks on them, huh?
Yeah. Yep. Which in that case, right? It's at that point, it's probably not going to be just a lift assist anymore. If you've been on the ground, if you're an elderly person, you've been on the ground for 24 hours, there's probably going to be detriments to your health because you probably haven't been able to drink and eat normally, right?
Right.
And other things like that. And so really it's if you look just at the surface of the service that we're able to provide on something like a lift assist, it can appear that we just show up, pick you up, and we're on our way.
Yeah, but who's to say that the person didn't, break their hip or they break something
exactly
when they fell? Or,
so really what it is I should say the people that I have learned from, the people that have mentored me have and then instilled this in me, that you need to have a high index of suspicion on any call like that, right? And like
mm-hmm.
you said, not only how long have they been down, what were the results of the fall, but why did they fall, right?
Right, yeah.
And so that's something that I'll look at all the time. And sometimes you can make a super minor change for that person after you help them up to prevent them from falling again, which, could actually legitimately save somebody's life. Because if you, say, hey, can we get this rug out of the way that you tripped on twice? Right. Can we just move it? Because it's not actually doing anything for you other than looking good.
It's actually more of a detriment to you. Yeah.
Correct. Because if the next time you fall, you don't have your cell phone with you, and you fall and hit your head on the table,
and now you're bleeding,
and now you have a brain bleed, and nobody's coming to find you,
right?
That could be a huge deal. And so, it's taking that critical look and seeing how can you help this person, how can you serve them so that this doesn't happen again,
right?
That it's not a dangerous thing for them.
Because they're a person, but they're somebody else's person as well.
Absolutely.
They're somebody's mom, or they're somebody's daughter, or somebody's brother, sister, cousin, uncle, whatever.
My lieutenant right now, he's one of my biggest mentors. Him and I have been partners for, I think over 2 years now. One of his biggest things that he told me the day that I came to his crew, and that mm-hmm. we tell everybody now that comes and works for us, is that we treat every single customer, person that calls 911 that we go interact with,
right,
like they're your grandma.
And
that's the level
should.
of service that we expect.
As you should. And so, yeah, I've got my sergeant currently right now. Years and years ago, when he was actually one of my FTOs, and he told me, he goes, think about it. What if that little kid is your daughter?
Mm-hmm.
What if that person just took your daughter and took them inside that house, right, as a hostage or whatever?
Mm-hmm.
What are you going to do? That's your kid.
What kind of service level would you expect from the other dude that's
right,
in your shoes?
Right.
Yep.
And so every time you go on something, you've got to consider that person that you're helping or saving or being there for is your family member, your mom, your dad, your brother, your child, whatever the case may be. So yeah, and absolutely, and and I ask those questions not because I didn't know or I think I'm trying to trick you. You got to play those devil's advocate, because there's somebody that asks that question that honestly doesn't know, mm-hmm, and they don't have ill will. They just don't know.
And that's actually I would argue the majority of the general public has no idea that that's an everyday occurrence for us, mm-hmm, doing something like that. And it's the same for the police side too. There's so much of your guys' job, that everyday little things that you guys do that in the moment, made a huge difference to somebody, but it's not newsworthy by any means. And so people they don't know about it.
Right. A lot of times we'll get those, I want to give kudos or whatever to the officer, and then they say, hey, this person, they put you in for a, good guy award or whatever. And, they're like, what happened? Oh, it was this, that. I don't remember that. And it's so minor for you.
Yeah.
Because we get things get overshadowed, unfortunately, so often. And so that's got to be something for you. You guys see all the time is you guys go on all these different things, go to these major incidents, but you get the kudos for the tiny little thing. You're like, oh, okay. And so, and it's cool, which is cool. And like you said, there's a majority of the general public that doesn't know that, and it's not because they're stupid or whatever. No, it has nothing to do with that. It's just because it's not an everyday. It's not shown in movies. Yeah. It's not shown in TV that what they do on TV and movies is they're going to these giant fires and they're doing these big police shootouts and car chases, and that's not the case. That's not what. I mean, yeah, that stuff does happen, but it's so minuscule. There's such a minute portion of what we do.
Yeah,
that is.
It's not to say that stuff's not important. Like, you need to train and be prepared for that type of stuff. But it also, I'm a huge proponent that doesn't mean that you shouldn't discount needing to give the right amount of effort to the more mundane or the everyday type stuff.
Right.
Because you're always preparing for that event that
major
is extremely low frequency, mm-hmm, right? We need to do that, absolutely, but it's not an excuse to not do what's right by that person who we're going to help. That it seems a lift assist or whatever compared to explosions and whatever. If you compare the two, it seems like why would you even think about that?
I had 5 lift assists today. Well, those 5 people absolutely appreciate not laying on the floor for 3 days.
Absolutely, and the medical calls and everything like that.
Right.
By comparison, one seems way more important that you would want to train on that thing all the time, but they're equally important to the people who are calling about that thing.
Right. So you do all that stuff. You every day it's just going in and out and helping people out and doing stuff. And so you decided that you want to keep getting after it and you want to do a little bit more. You want to do more than just be a regular fireman, be a regular engineer. I don't want to just do CPR and lift assists and put wet stuff on the red stuff. I want to do more. And so you are not just a firefighter, but you're also what?
I'm also a medic on our agency's SWAT team.
So you're a firefighter, mm-hmm, that's on a police SWAT team.
Correct. So
you get to not just wear fire, turnouts and the hat and the whole thing, but then you get to dress like a policeman sometimes and go and what's the ultimate mission of SWAT? Save lives, right? So you get to go.
How do you know that?
Oh, well, I don't know if I mentioned that before, but I was on the SWAT team for a number of years. I got off last year, and then
it's actually how we met.
It is how we met, and I'm not sure where the future holds for me for that. And I know it is that is an open book for me. I have not closed the chapter or closed the book on that.
I don't think it's ever anything that anybody could close the book on once they've been in it.
Right. So you're a SWAT team medic. And so what do you get to do on SWAT? I mean, other than medic stuff.
Yeah. So, well, first off, it's funny that they use the term medic because that is a term that means different things on the law enforcement side versus the fire side. So when you say medic on the fire side, that immediately means paramedic, which I'm not.
Okay.
But on the police side, anything involving medical, in my case, as a SWAT medic, including a team member needing ibuprofen or a Band-Aid, is a medic thing because it's medical. So they just call us medics. It rolls off the tongue. Maybe it's a a paramilitary term, which SWAT is a paramilitary thing.
Why don't we just call you corpsman? That's a Navy medic.
Yeah,
I mean, I guess that's what they call them in the Marines too. So,
but historically, if that was the term that was used, maybe that's the term that we would use on the law enforcement side.
Right.
But medic is like the universal. That's a person with medical knowledge and equipment.
Right.
So they call us medics. So being on SWAT, I'm myself and the other medic. We have 2 firefighters who are medics on the team. We're in charge of a multitude of stuff. So as far as like the specific to our certification as EMTs, obviously treating team members or members of the public or suspects that sustain injuries on an incident that we're involved in. We do logistics work. So obviously SWAT operations are a higher risk form of law enforcement work.
Right.
And so not all events that SWAT is involved in can be planned, but those that are, like search warrants, for example, if we are able to prepare beforehand, there's time to prepare beforehand, it's a planned event, we will come up with a logistics plan for medical care. So basically thinking about all the contingencies of if this goes wrong, if X person gets hurt, where are ambulances coming from? Where is that person? What hospital are they going to? If we're outside of an urban area, are we going to have medevac helicopters available?
Right.
Where are they going to land? What's the weather? Is that even an option today because of clouds or rain or whatever?
Right.
So all that type of stuff.
So you get into all these things. So you got to train regular old SWAT stuff when it comes to, entry into a house, or you've got to clear a room, or you've got to do all the different stuff that SWAT does, throw in a flashbang, right? And that's something you do. You train to do all that same stuff, right?
Know how to do, yeah. So
but you train to do it. That's not necessarily your specific job.
Not all the time. So
but
we are honestly, it's one of the things that drew me to not only the SWAT medic position as a whole, but also to the agency that I work for, is the fact that us as firefighters, as that are medics on the SWAT team, we're on a small enough SWAT team that's part of a small enough agency that everybody on the team has to have a diversified skill set for us to be successful.
Roll into something else.
Correct. We can't just be doing one thing.
Right.
And so it's not uncommon in most cases when you have firemen that are assigned to a tactical team. They get armor and they have tactical medical equipment and whatever, but they stay inside the truck, and essentially they're going to not be involved in operations until somebody becomes injured or needs medical care.
Right.
Our team is, quite honestly, is not big enough to facilitate that, and so we do get involved in doing those different skill sets.
So you're doing all the same stuff, plus making sure the medical stuff is taken care of. That the stuff that somebody might need to make it through a firefight, you have all the stuff to bandage them up right then and there. So then you can make sure that they can either continue what they're doing or get them out. Pretty quick. But you have to carry all that same stuff in addition to all the other stuff that you might have to carry.
Yeah, and obviously from a logistical standpoint, it would make no sense for the team to not try to protect us a little bit.
Sure.
Just because if they're to send me and the
right,
other
you go down.
medical dude in the door first and we both get hit, then we're kind of up creek without a paddle.
Right.
Not completely, because obviously another big part of our duties as being a medic on the team is training the other operators how to provide medical care to each other and to themselves. That's a huge part of our job.
Right.
but it would definitely not be optimal if both your medics got shot first.
Sure.
So
so keep you guys kind of in the back.
Yeah, so they try to give us some protection as far as where they're placing us, during that operation. But with that being said, depending on what type of operation it is or how many people we have there,
right.
We could get rolled into being a more frontline role, which happens pretty common
right.
for us.
So you guys are doing that. You guys, you're a firefighter, you're a SWAT team medic, you're an EMT. And it's all big time stuff. It's all really big. You do all these different things for everybody else, and all these big things. You don't do little things for people, right? So you were telling me just before I hit record on here. You started telling me about little something that you were doing today before you came over, because you're wearing some dungarees. To kind of put it lightly.
Yeah. We today, a bunch of guys that I work with, specifically an officer. When I say officer, on our side, that means a company officer, so a lieutenant
right.
on the fire engine. One of the officers on my shift, he and his company went on a call a month ago on an elderly person in the community that needed, I believe it was a lift assist, actually. I wasn't there. And noticed that she, the way that her house was configured was not conducive to her being able to be mobile. So
right.
she needs a walker to get around. But the front, how she gets out of her house is steps down the front of her, out of her front door,
right?
Which is not great if you're a person who is not super stable.
And you need some kind of
And so that individual, that officer, he's one of my biggest mentors. He was when I was on probation, when I first get hired with the fire department, he was my first kind of, we don't call them FTOs. That's
right.
like a police term, but
right.
essentially he was my first officer I was assigned to that was, training me when I was brand new.
Okay.
So he put together a fundraiser on social media to raise money for members of the community to buy lumber. And then this morning, a bunch of us went over there and actually built her a ramp out of her front door so that she doesn't have to navigate steps with a walker.
Right. And you were able to do this on duty?
Nope. I was off duty.
Oh, so completely on your own time.
Yeah. And so it 100% was not my doing. This was all
right,
Vinny's doing.
Right. But so your lieutenant goes and sets this whole thing up so he can get money for somebody else, or he can get lumber for somebody else, or he can build somebody else. He's related to this lady?
Absolutely not.
So he's not related to her. You got you and a bunch of other firefighters going over there and saying, hey, we're going to build you a ramp so you can get out of your house, so you don't have to take the chance of falling every time you want to go to the grocery store, or you want to go to church, or whatever you want to go do.
Yep.
So, that's the sort of thing that, when you say to me, well, I'm not a hero, I'm not a Navy rescue swimmer, I'm not special forces, I'm not whatever. That's the sort of stuff that you are. That's what makes the heroes, man.
Yeah, I guess the term hero, I guess, to me, it almost leaves a bad taste in my mouth sometimes. And I think that's why, obviously, I'll be perfectly honest, was super hesitant to come on and do this with you.
Sure.
And being perfectly honest as well, I think if I didn't respect you as much as I do, or I didn't know you, 100%, if it was somebody I didn't know that asked me to come do this, would have been a no. Right out the bat. Because like everybody else that's been on here, I don't see myself as that person, and none of us, I don't think, do any of these things to be recognized. Right. That's not the goal at all.
Right. And I know that, and I don't ask people who walk around with a button that says I'm a hero.
Yeah.
Or walk around with this thing like I was talking with Jeff last week, that wear a cape.
Yeah.
That's exactly right. You don't. Nobody thinks of them like that. And when I say, hey, the name of the podcast is the What's a Hero podcast. Well, that's just the idea. What is a hero?
Yeah.
What is hero? It's not somebody who calls themselves hero. I guarantee you.
Correct.
It is a person who gives extra. That's why you listen into the intro, and it talks about what it is. It's not this grandiose, these things we see in TV or in movies or we read in comic books or anything like that. It has nothing to do with that. It has to do with the fact that you do stuff for other people that you sacrifice for, that you don't even know these people. And you give your time, you give your effort, and you give all these different things that have they don't have a title. They don't have, and they don't necessarily get that word in the newspaper. There's no glory necessarily to it. It's these little things.
Yeah.
And like Jeff was saying last week, it has to be something that's inside, and it has to be something that it's just what you do. It's who I am.
Yeah.
And that's who the heroes are. That's what I'm looking for.
And I almost would I guess my definition of it, or at least the way that I look at it, is that it's not that one person or me or somebody else, right, is a hero, like, as a title.
Right.
To me, like, heroism to me is like a relationship. It's an impact that you made on somebody or somebody made on you, right?
Exactly.
And so, like, in this case, the thing that we were going to do this morning, like, I don't think Vinny, the guy who organized that whole thing, I don't think he would call himself a hero, right?
Right.
But to that citizen, he's absolutely a hero to her.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I don't think any of us then take that as a token and, like you said, put it on a button and say, I'm a hero because.
Right. No, and if you do that, then you're missing the point.
Absolutely.
You're missing what it is to be a hero.
Yep.
And you know, people, they wake up every day, and I know you do this, it's a job. You're going to do a job. But then when it goes beyond that, and it's not a job anymore, it's just what you do.
Mm-hmm. That's
what makes you the hero. That's what makes you more to somebody than just a firefighter. Now you are intrinsically that. It's who you are on the inside.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah. Yep.
Right.
I agree with you. At the same time, that term though, like, I think is where I think a lot of us, like, kind of take a step back a little bit.
Sure.
Because it's almost like, I think where a lot of us begin to have an issue with it is when you assume that because your title is X, right? You're a police officer, instant stamp hero.
Right.
And we all know that that's not the case.
Right. Because, and you know, that's the thing with some people, there's a number of people out there that don't think, oh, you know, I hate the cops. Or there's even, you know, I was talking to one of our guys at work. He used to work in a prison. And the guys in prison, they don't care whether you're a cop, firefighter, or whatever. If you are in that service world, you know, that you're just as bad as a cop. You might as well be a cop, right? And, you know, it's not that, you know, and in their world, it's just as bad. We know that we're not, that what we do isn't bad. And none of us want to go out and hurt somebody or see somebody get hurt or ruin somebody's day or change, but we want to make sure that it's good for the overall group of people, the overall population, our society, that there's an absolute good that's going on, and that we have a chance to help people and make it better and be more for those people so they can continue and they can go do good out in the world. Because the more that we give, the more that they have the opportunity, they can go give and they can go serve and they can go be.
For sure.
You know, and unfortunately some people are selfish, and it is what it is. But that doesn't mean, you know, that we're not going to be servants to them, and it doesn't mean that we're not going to go help them. But maybe that one little time that we do something that can kind of change someone's tune. Like, you know what? You know, these guys, they go out of their way to help other people. You know, maybe I can do that too. And so, you know, that's my hope. But if I name this podcast the What's a Guy podcast, what's a person podcast, everybody be like, yeah, well, I don't want. But it just has that name to it. You know, what is a hero?
I get it. Yeah, there isn't really any other word that means the same thing.
Right.
I know what you're saying. And
so you know, so those of you that I have asked that are listening, and you know, or I intend to ask in the future, you know, when you say, well, I'm not a hero, you're right. You don't think you are, but to somebody you are a hero. There's somebody out there that thinks, you know what, if that person wasn't on this planet, I don't know what I would do. And it makes a huge difference. And I mentioned this before, that there's three different ways people can look at you. There is the, you know, wow, I'm glad that person, I'm glad that person is gone. I don't want them. I'm glad that person is gone, because what they did here, it was just that they were a cancer in my life, and I'm glad they're not in my life anymore. or there's when they bring up the person's name, John Smith, and they say, who? They had absolutely zero impact on that person's life. Or then there's the third option is, man, I'm so glad you were here. I'm so glad you were in my life. Because if you hadn't been, my life would not be the same. Had that not happened to you, you go back to what we were talking about early on about your friend passing away in that fire of that trailer. Had that not happened, where would you go? What would your path be? We don't know. We don't know, but we got to know that the path that you're on is the right path. So what's your what does the future hold for Frank?
For me personally?
For Frank, yeah.
Professionally, sounds like I'm getting promoted again here in a couple months, which is cool.
Yeah, look at you go. See, it just you can't live with mediocrity, can you?
No. Yeah, I keep making more work for myself. It's not
exactly
a great strategy, but I enjoy it. It's I've always been a person who likes to have stuff going on. Like you said, I keep getting involved in more aspects of different types of work. So that's kind of the next big thing for me.
You see yourself being a firefighter your whole life and retiring as a fireman?
Potentially, yeah. I don't know. It's right now. I really love what I'm doing. It's definitely it's a really one of the biggest benefits of being in this career is that it really allows you to have a really good family life, which is great. That's something that I'm recently married, and so I don't have any kids yet, but that's definitely on the horizon. And thinking about being able to be there for my family a good amount of time is really cool. So that's a big aspect of sticking with this as a career, making this a career.
Yeah. Well, maybe 4 years, 5 years, 4 years.
What?
You've been doing this, you said?
Career? Going on 4, yeah.
So you're going 4 years. I mean, that's, you're a millennial, and not a lot of millennials stick with a job for that long and say, I'm going to make it a career. I'm going to be long term. I'm going to do this 20, 25, 30 years or whatever.
Yeah.
And that's not something, and you're sitting here saying, yeah, I see myself doing it.
I think the reason why most people that get into this, they stick with it, is not only because you fall in love with this job, and if you don't, then you're not going to do it for very long.
Right.
Because like you said, it's like there's a lot of stuff that we do that could be considered either mundane, and you get burned out on that really fast if you're not looking at it with the right lens, right? There's a lot of bad stuff that we see that some people don't want to see that for 30 years, or they don't want to do that.
Right.
There's sometimes the schedule just doesn't work for people, that not getting to sleep very good for 48 hours straight. Things like that just has an effect on people.
Or missing holidays or missing birthdays and
stuff like that. So not only like if you are able to navigate all that stuff and find the positive in it, and then really love this job for what it is, like the amount of pride that people take in becoming a fireman is a huge deal, because you really have to earn it.
Sure.
Like it's one of the most competitive career fields in the country to get into. Because I remember the first time I ever tested for a career position, I tested for Boise, Idaho Fire Department. They were doing an academy of 15 people, and they had 2,000 applications.
Oh, easy pickings.
So, good odds.
Sure.
Yeah. I tested horribly. But that kind of gives you a perspective of like, and obviously you test for a smaller agency, smaller department, you're going to have a lot smaller pool of applicants. But still, at that point, typically you're applying, there's 50 or 60 of you applying for one spot. Right. So the odds still aren't great. So you really
still got to be the best. You still got to be the best.
You got to grind, man. And it's really that's really what it is. Like when you're a student, you're not doing a lot of days off. You're not doing a lot of personal stuff. Like that, this is your life for 2 or 3 years, so that you can get a job, get off probation, and then start to, be able to enjoy your days off a little bit, because you're not studying and going to school and things like that. So when you have to like really work for a couple of years, I think to earn a spot as a career guy, that's something that you're super proud of, and that you're probably not just gonna get bored of, or whatever.
Yeah,
move on.
So before we started recording, you asked me a question. What was that question you asked me?
I asked you kind of what inspired you to make this podcast, and then along those lines, like specifically the title.
Right. And I guess we kind of covered the title a little bit, because I want to, what is the title? And if I had changed it, if I made it something else, it'd be, well, that doesn't really make sense for what you're trying to accomplish. And so what I am trying to accomplish is, and I guess what got me into this in the first place was, I listen to podcasts. I used to listen to nothing but music. You get in my car, that's all you would hear is music. Now, it's podcasts, and I listen to podcasts all the time, and it's
same way.
And it's just I get into hearing stories, and I want to hear about people and why. And I started thinking, as I would talk to people, and I've gone to various places, outside the country and everything, and you meet people, and you start talking to people about, hey, how come you did this? How come you did this? And then they start telling these life stories, and you're like, oh my gosh, to think of all the little things that could have happened in your life that got you to where you are now, and that what caused us to cross paths. And then what it is that you said that now has an impact on me. Mm-hmm. Had that not happened to you, would you have been able to have that impact on me, or would we even be crossing paths? And who knows? So what I get to thinking is that there has got to be people that I know, and not just people I know, but people that are in this profession that we serve other people, whether it be law enforcement, firefighters, paramedics, vets, active or guys that have gotten out, nurses, doctors, people and teachers, people that give their time. They've got to have stories about why it is they got to where they are. And those are so powerful. And like I mentioned before, that little bit, could have that impact on somebody that doesn't know, that I just don't know what I'm going to do with my future, because they haven't had that opportunity to be invited into that person's world for a minute, to be able to see, oh my gosh, there's ways to do it. There's ways to go about becoming something more. And so as I get to thinking about this, and I've been thinking about it for a long time, coronavirus comes up, and all the shutdowns, and everybody's doing different things, and you start hearing about people saying, oh, I started this or started that. Well, I haven't not worked during the coronavirus thing. Well, I had a month that I was off work for various reasons, but not that I got in trouble, but I took some time off, and but it wasn't coronavirus related, and I got to thinking, you see all these people doing this stuff, and if you're going to do something, don't say, well, I'm going to do it, I'm going to start on that date, and I'm going to make sure. You just go do it. Don't procrastinate. Just if you're going to do something, go do it. And I've held, I didn't have the equipment that I needed to do a podcast, and that stuff I was able to get, and I was able to get my hands on it and start developing how do you make a podcast. Well, I start learning. I go on YouTube, and I taught myself how to make a podcast, and whether it's good or not, I don't know. I'm not the one that listens to it, unbiasedly. And hopefully that if you're listening to this, you understand what's good and what's bad. And if, like I said, if you have input, and that's ultimately what it is that the listener has input, saying, hey, this is what I want to hear. This is what, and we want to bring you so much. I want to bring you information, but I want to make sure that it's good. I don't want just to be rambling like apparently I am now, but that's the idea, is that you want to get stuff that gets people's interest. And so I knew that was out there. I knew people that have stories that are fantastic, and that will encourage people and motivate people to be better. And that's what, and I said, we just got to get it. There's no other, I don't have another medium to get it out there. There's things that I think about all the time that I want to get out there. And how else can you get that and say that other than, this is a great medium to do that. I'm not a YouTube personality that I can get on there and I, make these awesome videos and stuff like that. And I'm not sure. I'd have to learn how to do it, but obviously if I can teach myself certain things, I can teach myself other things. So, but that's what it is. And I want to just get it out there that if you don't think you're a hero, you can still get on and, show people that, hey, I did this, I did that, and people look at you and say, well, that guy really does. If you've sacrificed time and money and effort and everything else, you're a hero. Just for other people, you're a hero. So, and I a lot of times I would sit there and I would ask, so Frank, where could people find you, whatever, and that's not something, you're not a public figure. So I'm not going to ask you, what's your Instagram and what's your all this different stuff, because that's not the case here. if one day when you run for public office, we'll ask you, and
never.
Yep,
Never,
you're gonna be some kind of senator or whatever. I can see it now. No, but you can find the What's a Hero podcast on Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, or the ever famous Facebook at What's a Hero, and we are at the What's a Hero podcast.buzzsprout.com as well. You can email me, or some people have DM'd me. I may very well reply. So send me those questions and maybe show ideas. Or if you have a hero you think would be great for the show, let me know. We all need more motivation, and it works both ways. So the stories motivate and encourage others, while the heroes are encouraged knowing their life's work has planted a seed, helping them know it was all worth it. So, Frank, do you have anything to add?
No. Thanks for having me.
Man, I appreciate you coming, and it's been great. Just getting to know your kind of little backstory on why it is you do what you do. So, my final thought was, when I got divorced from my first wife years and years ago, we agreed to share our kids. It was kind of we did a 50-50 split sort of thing, and I got them one week, and she got them the next. The weeks they were with her, I struggled. I went to work, I came home, I slept, I ate, and went back to work. And I drove a forklift that time, and I was separated from other people the whole day. So I'd never been alone before, even when I was in the military. There was other people around me. And this is when I had an epiphany. And that was that we're meant to have people in our lives, and we're meant to be on this planet for other people. Now, you can do good things or you can do bad things, but good things don't exist without service to others. Bad things are fairly selfish and obviously have no merit, and they produce no fruit. If you're a hero, a police officer, a firefighter, a soldier, marine, airman, sailor, nurse, doctor, teacher, any other servant to your fellow man, and are struggling through whether to keep going or just to throw in the towel, just to go to work and make a living and not make a difference, consider this. If you don't stand your ground and stand for those who can't stand for themselves, who is going to? The adage from the Travis Manion Foundation states it like this: if not me, then who? We can all consider this in our lives. So for Frank, thanks for being here, sir. I appreciate it. I'm Ken, and we are clear.